I've been in America for 7 days after being in Thailand for 7 months. And of course, a lot of people have been asking me, what do you like better? Where do you like living in 2025? Asia or America? The current Anglosphere or the ancient Sinosphere? So I came up with like 10 different things that I noticed off the top of my head. And the truth is this, TLDR guys, it depends on you as a person, your own situations, but they're certainly different. Yes, I get it. There are certain westernized parts of Bangkok like Sukhumvit. There's certain easternized parts of New York City or America in general, like ethnic enclaves, everything from Flushing to LIC. Obviously, if you compare that against West Village, it's completely different. It's almost like a different country. But there are things that generally hold the same. So first off, guys, we got to talk about it. And by the way, forgive me for being quick, guys. I just recorded this whole video and I realized the subway sounds messed it up. So I had to go back inside and redo it for you guys. Point number one, the body mass volumes are completely different in the East to the West. Obviously, it's a stereotype, it's true or whatever, especially white Northern Europeans and some black people really tall could have a lot more muscle mass than Asians, but also could have a lot more fat. And I think that they can pack a lot more fat on. And for whatever reasons, well, I know the reasons, but there's a ton of reasons, Western people are not as fat phobic and they're just way fatter than Asians are. And I think it has to do to the diet. Like, here's just a photo of what I got at the bodega. If you would have saw what people were getting around me, it was insane. I'm talking about rich people, poor people, EBT, non-EBT, rich white kids. They was all getting cookies and cakes. Yeah, they would buy different cookies and cakes. You know, one's getting Oreos, one's getting the little premium cookies or whatever. But like at the amount of like sugar, fat, salt, carbs, starches that people were intaking was insanity. Even me, I got the unhealthy protein injected healthy stuff. And some people really blame it on the industrial food complex that happened after World War II in the UK, America, Australia to a certain level. I think Australia got like maybe less of it. I think they eat more fresh foods over there, and the UK might have the worst diet and America might be in the middle. But yeah, just you know, people are very fat phobic in Asia in a way they're not in America. Just look at the stewardesses. Like maybe I shouldn't say this. I flew Alaska on the way here. Mrs. Doubtfire, you know what I mean? Like very nice though, nice ladies. But like obviously the Asian airlines, they pick stewardesses. Honestly, you gotta be almost like a former model or a quasi model. Whether you're a guy or a girl, if you wanna be a flight attendant. But to be fair, people in America got a lot more muscle too. You got a lot more, America's like very contradictory. You got Brian Johnson trying to live forever. You got Dominican T-Mobile managers being ripping out of their shirt doing bachata. You got, you know what I mean? They like Ice Spice, Thick Uptown. They like Lena Dunham, the frumpy Bushwick, Calvin Klein, heroin, cocaine chic, Soho disappearing into thin air. Like it's a lot. In Asia, they just kind of like thin and not that muscular. But it depends on what culture you buy into too, right? Subculture, which lunch table in high school you sat at during lunch. Point number two, this is a little bit more of a serious thing. You know, it's not related to just BMI and body mass, like measuring people like a couch or like a glass of water, but just I realized that ideology has kind of become theology in the absence of religion. I'm not gonna get too much into it. Anglo countries, you know, for the most part, yes, it was part of the creation story that it's Protestants escaping from Catholicism. So there's some Protestantism mixed with Greco-Roman intellectualism, mixed with some Viking Druidism from, you know, that's what England was like. And basically what I'm saying is in the absence of the religion, people have turned their identity into something sacred. And I remember that, you know, it wasn't always this way and that's just where we're at. And that's everybody up, left, right, down doing it. And you can look at Sinospheric countries or Sinospheric extended countries, right? Countries that are kind of like part of ancient Chinese culture to some extent, right? Whether that's, you know, Confucianism, Buddhism, chopsticks, eating noodle soups, right? These are these zones for the most part, more or less, right? Some a lot more than others. But the reason why secularism works is because I think people in the East just fundamentally don't need something to fight, die, or kill for. And I think in the West, unfortunately, maybe due to the Viking Norse aspects, there is that desire. So when you take away the religion, people are just willing to die over just like a minute identity thing that in the East would like never even escalate to that point. And this identitarian battles being made existential to somebody's existence I don't know how you're gonna reverse it, but it's not good, right? Point number 3, Americans can be super rich while still being super ignorant, at least the older generation. I was talking to a lot of rich soccer moms on my flight from Taipei to SFO, and people were flying from wherever they were vacationing from, Australia or whatever, and I was just like, man, only in America you can kind of be like Beverly Hillbilly rich. Like you can have a ton of liquidity and like residual cash income streams, but really not know much about the world. Like if you look at the people with a lot of money, typically in other countries, they've had to adapt to British or American culture already, their own culture, their own various levels of their own culture, socioeconomic statuses, and they got to be on some GQ, Cosmo, Crazy Rich Asians, or like Global Jet Set. You know what I mean? Like be well read, kids went to BU, BC, or maybe a better school if they could get in. And it's just like really different. Like I guess what I'm saying is like in America, it's a privilege to be that parochial and that small town minded, but still have access to that volume of liquidity. It's very different. But like I said, it's a privilege. I think it's a privilege that's going away. I'm not mad at it. Listen, if I was Mark Wahlberg, I might be thinking like, what? Yeah, I like not caring about everybody, but still becoming a billionaire. I like that. That's good. That's bad that it's going away. But you know, obviously I'm more on the global side because I never was born into that. But a lot of things in life are just based off individual positioning. I'm just pointing it out. Point number 4, we have certain habits that we over-index as Americans. Wearing baseball caps backwards, using iPhones, iMessage. Other countries use a lot more Android folding phones, especially in Asia, in China. Of course, they make a lot of folding phones in China, even though we don't get them here. Collegiate sweatshirts, red cups, frat sorority at collegiate aesthetic, eating peanut butter instead of Nutella, Biscoff, Milo, you know, driving American cars, Ford, Chrysler, GM, even American EV brands, Tesla, Rivian, Lucid. You know, they just don't got a lot of that overseas. Hummers, and you never see a Hummer overseas. Point number 5, people assume that Asians are more fobs, especially people that are above 45 years of age in America. Yeah, I mean, when I got to the airport, you know, some of the people were like, oh, are you with them? You know, just kind of assuming that the Asians were with each other and stuff like that. I used to get asked if I spoke English, but that was like 10, 15 years ago. Those days are kind of over, but it's still kind of like some lack of, I guess when I would say when it comes to Eastern people, a lot of older Western people are kind of flying blind in terms of like how they analyze us or what they know or what they think they know. They might have like larger stereotypes that might be outdated or true at one time, but now they just look silly if they put it on you or whatever. But yeah, I don't think they mean really anything by it. But I will tell you this crazy story that has to do with Asian stereotypes. As I touched down at SFO, and there's these 2 Chinese tech people from like Beijing. I think they're like a married couple or they're like dating. And I saw this like Bulgarian or like Russian dude like hit on the girl right in front of the guy. Maybe he didn't know it was her boyfriend. It seemed awfully like he did know. But yeah, that's just because people stereotype Asians. Not masculine. I want to take your girl. I'm just going to ask her out in front of you because I'm not scared of you or whatever. And anyway, I was going to throw up a photo of him, but maybe I'll just black it out. Anyway, point number 6, crime and drug use. I think that I'm not making this story up, guys. I was checking in at JFK, and at JFK, there's somebody who leaves some Yves Saint Laurent glasses, you know, at the bag scan. This is a crazy story. See, I don't even know if I should say. There were some gypsies, I think, that were talking about taking the glasses, but they said that they couldn't because they were in the airport and they were speaking, you know, part probably Romanian, part English, you know, but I was like, that's what they were saying. And I was like, yo, that's so crazy because after being in Asia for that long, the discussion that they knew that I could hear about them taking the glasses, which obviously somebody forgot. Maybe they felt like it was a victimless crime or whatever. But like, I was just like, yo, that's crazy. It's already back in America. Obviously, that's like a light. I'm not even talking about, you know, zombie zones in Kensington or Tenderloin in SF. Kensington is North Philly, by the way. And it's just like, I just think it's crazy the way like some like looseness and crime and like degeneracy is just like normalized in America. Like you know how some people are doing the fentanyl to like hold a spot in an urban metropolitan area. That's crazy. Because think about it. Everybody knows what the fentanyl is. Yo, bro, can you do the fentanyl for me? Hold a parking spot? Like obviously it's like kind of a half joke, but some people legitimately do it. And I don't know, man. It's just like, it's funny when I was in Hong Kong and I was playing basketball, Because even though I was in Thailand for 7 months, I went to Hong Kong 3-4 times already. Even in that 7 months, I went to Vietnam, I went to Indonesia, I went to Vietnam, I went to Anyway, I went to a bunch of places. But I'm saying it's like everybody was always asking me about like O Block, especially when you play basketball, because people play basketball tend to be more into hip hop, urban culture. And then I was like, of course the whole of America is not really like O Block, but I will say that there's an increased feeling in 2025 that something from O Block could come out and like sting you like a mosquito or like a hornet, even though that's like a hornet's nest. You know what I mean? So I guess like that's the thing. And I just think in America, you got to turn on that RoboCop scanner, that Iron Man Jarvis scanner. And if you don't have that scanner, like you just can't handle a lot of things. So you either got to stay super isolated in an area where you don't need to robo scan anything through Jarvis or RoboCop like visor land, or you have to up the levels. But it's tough because some of the immigrants, and it's sort of like the guy who got his girl hit on. First of all, by the way, this is back to the SFO story with the Bulgarian dude. But it's like, I don't even know if the other dude registered it, but he wasn't ready for it. But he wasn't even going in there like, no, this is my girlfriend. Yo, this is my wife or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? But it's just like, because nobody in China would ever do that. You know what I mean? And that's like a micro example. That wasn't even like criminal at all. You know what I mean? That was just like maybe a little bit like ultra bro-ish. So, like I said, if you don't got the RoboCop Jarvis scanner in America, or depending on where you live, I don't know. That's just not a good idea in my opinion. Anyway, point number 7. The interactions, at least in New York, is crazy because a lot of people, they're going to say this is a con, but for me, it's actually kind of a pro. It's like people are very blunt and direct with each other, and they can kind of yell at each other, but they could be cool with each other. And I just think that, like, for me, that's something I really miss, because in Asia, there's so much peace, but in a way, I kind of like how hype everything is in New York too. So I don't know, it could go either way, but that's just a New York thing too. Like, cause I know Seattle is more like Canada, or at least at one point was more like Canada. Now that Seattle's got a lot of transplants, but like at one point, Seattle was a little bit more like Scandinavian. If you guys know about Seattle, there's a lot of Scandinavian people there. They're very, it's very passive aggressive and rainy and glum, drab. Point number 8, I noticed that people in America all try to lean into a look. Like, I think in Thailand, they are into like cool identities and stuff, but it's more of like a generalistic influencer look. But like, I noticed people were like more dressed for their neighborhood out here, like on a train. Even if you see people from Bushwick look like they're from Bushwick. People from Williamsburg look like richer people from Bushwick. People from the LES look like creative directors. People from Murray Hill look like frat bros and they're buff. And like people from Uptown, they look like they're from Uptown, and people from West Village look like they're from West Village. And that might just be a New York thing, but I think it's because actually a lot of archetypes actually emanate from either New York or LA anyway. You know what I mean? Like a Silver Lake look is going to be relatively just a sunnier version of a Williamsburg look. But I guess what I'm saying is a lot of the looks globally still come from America, so it would make sense if Americans embody the most purest version of it. Possibly. Maybe it's also Fashion Week. So, point number 9, public cleanliness. I just think that in America, like especially in New York, public cleanliness has got to have regressed. I'm not saying it's back to the 90s where people are like burning trash cans in the oil bins. You know what I mean? It's not like Warriors, like that movie Warriors. Warriors come out. That's like old. But I'm just saying they're probably just regression since Bloomberg, for sure, right? Yeah, it's just like a K-shaped recovery. I think that there's more and more like Zero Bond and like Kith Paddle Club with $36K entrance fee. So there's more stuff that's like hyper elite like that. And you get deal flow for venture capital or for private equity through that thing. But then it's almost like, yeah, the public spaces, the parks are like as bad as they've ever been. Like, you're not going to see people play at the same parks anymore. Like, man, New York City basketball is done. It's all indoors now, all private runs. Point number 10, I do think that it's very different. I think New York City right now, 2025, caters to women. Like, just look at how many pastry shops and nice coffee shops there are and stuff like that, which is not wrong. But then I think Bangkok caters more to men. Because I actually have a friend from Bangkok who's working at a pretty high up corporate job in New York. Some visa issues, didn't get picked for the lottery, had to go back to Thailand. But she visits New York all the time. And she was telling me, as a girl, I would want to come back to New York and live the next 10 years of my life. But if I was a guy or my brother, I would tell him to stay in Bangkok, given my situation. So it goes to show you that Bangkok and New York are actually very similar, like architecture-wise, in some ways. Like Bangkok has got a lot of skyscrapers, like a lot more than you think. And like, but one is, yeah, one caters to guys, one caters to girls. Not wrong, not right. Just call it out. I think that aging people, elderly in Asia can be out a lot more by themselves. Point number 12. I think like in America, they might have good like programs or like medicine for older people, but just like it's not fully safe due to the street volatility for older people to be out. You see in all the videos of the Chinese parks, or even in Thailand, man, you see somebody who's like 80 years old selling fruits sometimes, or like trinkets on the side of the street. Nobody's gonna do anything to them, you know, even if they're handling cash. Like people will respect an 80-year-old person that is selling these things outside of anywhere, a temple, a side street. I got boat noodles, kway teow rua from like this Thai lady that probably was like 80 years old. I don't know. Like, you know, I was still getting them like I was in the canals. And last but not least, I think number 12, I just think the food and convenience, for sure. Like in America, a lot of places that are like open late are more like 7-Eleven, right? But 7-Eleven is way worse in America. Obviously, New York is the exception to this. New York is a little bit more similar to Asia. That's why so many Asians like New York, despite New York being like dirty and quote unquote dangerous. Like, because like the style of life in New York City is almost the only place that matches up the urban metropolitan centers in Asia. Hong Kong, Shanghai, Seoul, Tokyo, Bangkok, Singapore. I mean, Singapore is a very sanitized example, but like, you know what I'm saying? Jakarta. So it's like that's why the Asians love it so much. But yeah, obviously in New York, you can go to a bodega, a deli, or whatever, you know what I mean? So yeah, ultimately, man, when you weigh it all out, what is it better to live in? Asia in 2025 or America in 2025? Honestly, if you're like a guy without a family and you don't need to raise your kids, because it is true that like even a decent international school overseas could be like $40, $50, $60,000 USD a year. I would say it's probably better to be in Asia right now overall, but you're never wrong to be in America either, because I think all these answers are about individual positioning. But I think that at different eras and different decades, the answers were more clear. Like 30, 40 years ago, for sure, be in America. Asia was not really booming like that, especially not Southeast Asia. And now I think in 2025 is a lot more of a real question of just, you know, what's your situation? And I always tell people, it's just like my example about societies, you know, about like why does Asia work secularly, but like for some reason, like the West is kind of like struggling without some sort of like spiritual grounding or whatever. It's because of the personnel. There's the schematics and the play sets and the play action and the general overall offensive defensive philosophy, just like in basketball, that your team runs, but your team has to be able to execute it. If you have a switch everything type of defense, you better have rangy athletic defenders that can guard multiple positions. Otherwise, you have to go man, or you have to do the zone or something. Like, you just can't switch everything, because then they're gonna hunt mismatches. So I think it's just like that. Like you can look at that analogy for a lot of things, where it's just like, or MMA, where it's like, it comes down to styles make fights, where I'm like, man, it just depends on your style and your needs. So for me personally, my style and my needs right now, I wanna be in Asia. But it doesn't mean that if I were to have a family and start popping out, well, obviously I wouldn't pop at the kids, but like my wife were to start popping out kids, then for sure, logically, depending on it, I would more move back to America. Not even 100%, it would depend on, you know, who you marry or who you have kids with. But basically what I'm saying is, I think it's just a lot more 50-50 nowadays in terms of the calculations. And you just have to know, I mean, like we said, like everything in America, this downside, you can protect yourself from it if you want, and you can catch more of the upside. And just like Asia, you know, it just really depends on how you interface with it. And are you gonna be, you know, but it, of course, based on your character, it's gonna make you like more or less apt, or like probability wise likely to catch upsides and mitigate downsides. Anyway, guys, those are my brain dump thoughts, man. I did this video twice. I thought I had the whole thing done, and then the subway came and messed up the whole video, and the audio was going crazy. But anyway, guys, that's what I say when people ask me, do you like Asia better, or you like America in 2025? The Anglosphere or the Sinosphere, I say, man, it just is different depending on who you are. But for me, I'm going with the East.